I think we probably should make tracks as we go. So it's great to be here, and I wonder before formally starting off into whatever, let's start the well, I should do the proper stuff. We're being recorded. You guys all know that. And we have it.
There we go.
Thank you. Well, look, again, welcome back. It's great to be here on a cooling down day. I've been in Wellington all week. It's been beautiful. It's been a colder day coming from the south. Good welcome, and you're well aware that the meeting is being recorded, and I think you know the exits better than I do from this place. But let's be sensible about all of those things. Could you join me, please, in the karakia to open the meeting? Kia ora,
Marino,
Oana, e wharahi matato, te tarangi, aroa,
aroa,
aroa mai, tātou ia tātou.
May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for all of us this day. Let's show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. It's pretty darn good, isn't it? So we're a small group and we've got about an hour before we at this stage lose a quarter. So Woody, we will try and make the most of your presence here. Can I just firstly record the apologies? We have one from Kay, and I take it in effect we should probably record one from Martin. And I'm sorry, not from Martin, sorry. Yes, from Martin, sorry, other Martin, Bosley. You call him Bos, I get names. And
one for
departing early at 3:30. And I think we note that there's a Maori rep, but that's yet to be named and probably confirmed. So there we go. So I'll move from the chair. So second. Thank you, Con. Motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Please say aye. Those against? Brilliant. Any matter on the agenda that would worry you and your interests? I think so. Doubt it would be. I've got no public participation. There's no actions because there's no public participation. I've got no advice for extraordinary business, Amy.
No.
So we have the minutes of our last meeting, here being 24 April being the grant, us and grant speak, where I ended by way of Zoom. It's great for you to put up with that. Right, so I'll move to the chair and take them as a current record over a seconder, please. Woody, I'll make the most of you, seeing your. You went there, you went there.
No, I'm happy to do that, yeah.
Are there any matters of accuracy or correction that you noted from reading them? Pretty much like it was the one that I was at. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. We'll then go into matters arising from previous meetings. Oh, we've got somebody, have we?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's online.
Maria. Man.
You just want to double check this?
Hello, Mark. Can you hear us? He's with us.
I think we have to hit the invite, don't we?
Yeah, it's just zero.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Can you hear us okay, Mark? We could actually be able to hear him because once he goes, it'd be nice to report.
Martin, can you hear us online?
You are muted at the moment.
Maybe some technical.
Okay. Matters arising from the previous minutes. I think it comes up under the action item. So I'm comfortable we can move on past that. Then gets us straight into the substantive stuff and the Charlie show, I think. Charlie show on the holiday.
Thank you very much.
I keep hearing about Charlie.
Yes.
So look, the insurance renewal, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So our insurance is split into two sections. We insure our underground infrastructure through the local authority public protection program. And That is in share with government, central government, who cover the 60%, and the LAPP LAP that cover 40% remaining. And they are on a 1 November renewal date. Then our above ground assets are renewed through March with a 1 July date for the renewal each year. With the underground infrastructure, we had already budgeted to increase the premium by 20%, which was 34,000 in our consultation document. We was since advised after the consultation had already opened that the level of insurance cap that they had been applying had not been changed in a significant number of years, like a few years. And therefore the asset values had really gone away and above that. And their recommendation, their desire initially was to increase it all in one go. So to do quite a big increase in 1 year. But members have been feeding back that we would prefer a slower 2-year staged increase. Their indications were anywhere between another 20% and 80%. So we recommended at last week's deliberations to go with an extra 68,000 of budget premium. And that was approved at the deliberations meeting. So insurance will be something that comes up in our LTP planning, I'm sure. Yeah. For the above ground assets, so buildings, playgrounds, treatment plants, other assets, we joined together with Carston and Masterton and used Marsh as our broker. That gives us a larger grouping and therefore more attractive proposition for the market. We do have a fairly low risk profile, although we are counted as being in Wellington region, so we do have that earthquake risk there. We have asked this a few times before of the previous risk committee of levels of insurance, like excluding some smaller assets from our insurance schedule. You don't get much of a saving on the premium there, but what you do get is a bit of efficiency in terms of the administration of the policies, and again, claims processing. So if you had a claim for a lot of the asset base, including tiny assets in there may delay some of those claims in terms of the assessment. So it can be an efficiency and administrative savings. And you reduce the risk of over-insuring as well by including those small assets. So I've included an appendix there of our 2023-24 values and highlighted the ones that are under $50,000. We thought this was an appropriate level to consider. So recommendation from the officers is that we exclude those highlighted assets under $50,000 from our renewal this year.
Shall yes, much.
So when I look through the valuation total sum insured, I see a number of things under 50,000. Now I should say I don't have any pretty colours, so that can be a problem. But I do see some assets worth less than 50,000 that do not appear to be low lighted. Am I correct or wrong?
Now that those are, unless I've missed some, part of a larger asset. So it's
Okay.
so for example, the seats and bollards at the town centre,
Right.
Featherston, are part of the larger asset.
Right.
So it's just a component.
Okay. And the other question I have, if I may, Bruce,
Yeah, different.
is have you done a sort of but we'd be unlikely to replace this even if it did burn down type of analysis? Because I do wonder and whether we would, for example, replace the old courthouse on Fox Street if something bad happened to it.
So that is a guidance that we would need from.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking, have,
Analysis on that. This time round, we've asked whether there was interest in that sort of analysis, and there has been none. If we get indication from council members that there would be interest in that, we could look at that for the long-term plan.
well, I certainly signal that I would be interested.
Yes, Con.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Charlie, just in terms of excess on any one individual claim, can you just tell us what that is for the likes of the assets that you've listed here?
So the straight deductible is $5,000.
So for any one claim, there's 5K?
Mhm.
And also, could you answer whether or not we've had any claims over the past 6 years?
We had the garage at Payne Farm. That was a claim around just under 30,000, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And we had a flooding incident at the Featherston Sports Centre, I believe. That was around about 11,000. Now, we're not removing that asset from the schedule.
Okay.
So with that 5,000 deductible staying, that would still have been covered. It's only if we.
Excellent, thanks for that. And just, sorry, just a quick note on underground assets. We've got a far greater excess for any one particular claim on those.
Well, yes, there's a $400,000
It's
minimum
400,
claim with the government scheme.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks, please.
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
Just couple of queries. All the cemetery things in here concerns me. So we have an earthquake and all those cemetery walls, ashes walls and that fall down. I feel that they're going to be something that the public want to have fixed extremely quickly. And I'm wondering if they should be insured, but obviously it depends on what your excess is, likelihood, everything else, of course. And it's just got the hay shed in Tilson's Road. Is that on the block we use, like where the aerodrome is for the glider club, is it? Or is that beside the edge of the road that's in road reserve?
I would say so, that that's associated with the gliding club, but I can find that out.
Just be interesting. Just trying to think. I think there's one on the edge of the road down there, and I was just wondering if it was something to do with road reserve while we owned it, it could actually be sold off if we don't need it. You know, if it's not
Actually on the farm.
It's on the farm, I
yeah,
think, which
it
is
is, yeah.
separate to
Yeah.
the glider club.
And there's a dwelling there as well, is
we
it?
don't use it. It's not vital for that to be insured, I wouldn't think, but yeah. Yeah, just concerned about the cemetery things, like if something does happen, that's generally what the public or self personally would want fixed pretty quickly, but
So I suppose that's another question of, would you replace it exactly with an ashes wall again?
yeah. Or
Or would
something.
you perhaps put up a memorial to those whose ashes were lost and the memorial was lost in the incident? That's,
So just give me, I was just interested, there were 3 questions for me too, Charlie. One is the premium last year from Caravan was $397. What's it proposed for this year?
for which,
Imperial damage, we've got $397 and $10, 23, 24. So what is it? 5 or have you not?
we've budgeted a 20% or just under 20% increase. So,
20%, and then you've got a premium for lap,
yes,
for which you're allowing another 68,000.
another 68 on top of the 20.
Order of cost for the lap premium.
I'd have to come back to you.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
No, don't. So
Yep.
what I'd like to do is, we can act on this, but the third leg of the insurance spectrum for us is public liability. And it probably has different renewal date, doesn't it, to these two for us?
Please, sorry.
Material damage, they're all coming the same day ones.
Yes, they were all the 1 July.
1 July.
Yeah.
Right, look, look, this is good. So I mean, I think we're raising, you know, you're raising, leading us to discuss and raising good points, which is the expense of that and the rationalisation of damage. I think there's two things that have come out of the conversation. One is the completeness of our total insurance profile, which is why I've asked about public liability. Because that is actually an exercise in risk. And I mean, honestly, yeah, I'm sure you don't look over the hill. And you'll see the contortions we're getting ourselves into as to how we.
Yep.
I think the second thing that's really important is really the one that you've raised, Martin, which is actually what is, as they call in the business, what is the maximum probable loss? So, Woody, the chances of us probably losing all our cemetery walls in one hit could well be quite low.
Yeah, it'd be
To the point that actually
like one,
if we did,
it'd be more like.
we would probably have much bigger issues. It's like in Telpo, we don't worry, we don't insure for a volcano.
Yeah.
Because what he's going to be around to worry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But having said that, somebody doing work with us over maximum probable loss would actually be saying, what is the probable upside of the loss you would suffer?
Yeah.
And that then starts to give us a chance to have a discussion about actually what is the cost of covering that risk? What would we pay that? What do we do? So I think you've given us good stuff, but you've given us a teaser here.
A very good start, yeah.
I say, Charlie, and I would be very keen,
Mhm.
and presumably it's with Marsh, but I'd be very keen as to how we can progress a broader risk discussion around itself.
Absolutely, yep. And Marsh came and,
Holiday first,
yeah,
Charlie.
yeah, came and spoke to council
Yeah, absolutely.
in the spring, I think it was, and yeah,
Yeah.
they're happy to do so again.
Do we act in cooperation with our fellow councils in the Wairarapa on places?
Yeah, with the two, Marston and Casterton,
Yeah.
yeah,
Should be some efficiency in that.
yes,
Yes.
I think they assured us they were.
yes, already, yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'm used to saying the Waikato or the Bay of Plenty column where the maximum probable loss applies to each council. Only seems it's actually it's a very efficient way to go.
Mm.
It's neat, done. Okay, that's good. Right, so the motion as we receive, you've obviously done the deliberations that like 60, you're around for 68. What the funeral rates, 68,000.
oh, it's about
Homicide rates.
0.3, so 250,000. Yeah,
So this is. So,
and we had made.
Record that, actually,
Yeah.
yes.
We had made significant efficiency savings across the business, to the tune of about 550,000, so yeah.
So we're comfortable we can handle that. And we're also probably ready for administrative efficiency reasons. But I would, as I say, anticipate when the risk that all cemeteries go on, that's
pretty slim.
probably marginal.
It's more likely Featherston or Greytown that one in an earthquake you'd lose.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then you've got to start thinking pretty hard. But we're saying so I mean, it's the risk discussion we're prepared to take on. We've high level of risk for administrative efficiency. Rightio, do I have a move and a second for the motion?
Which one are we moving?
We're moving all three.
All
I'm
three.
trying to go on one hit here.
Can I suggest move an amendment then?
Well, just tell us. Well, this is,
Okay.
we'll do it officially here.
Well, I thank you. Okay, so I would request a report on similar to the below 50,000 on assets that we are likely to not want to replace if they were destroyed.
You're requesting a more detailed report.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, why don't we just wrap that up? Sorry, if I could, I don't want to, I'm happy that you have that, and I agree with that, but I mean, your good comment was the inspiration to say we need a larger discussion of our risk. Sorry, our insurance, what do we use in the IT? Our risk
Appetite.
relationship to insurance. So I think if we're going to have a 4, which is that we request them to come back to us about a broader discussion on insurance and risk. And let's put in that, Martin, including assets we are unlikely to place. I think that would be good. So if I was to, I know I'm a wee bit outside procedure here, Amy. Let's assume let's accept we've got those four over move that. You happy to move that, Woody? Thank you, seconder. Thank you, Martin. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against is carried. Rightio, thank you. So let's get into financials, which I had seen, and thank you, Janice, Amy, or somebody sent me April financials as well yesterday. Thank you.
We are,
Look through. Thanks, Charlie.
we are today discussing March, so quarter three.
Yep.
March financials, which again are largely to budget, with the exception of the emergency works expense and corresponding subsidy income in land transport. Surplus is 2.2 above budget, but that's as a result of those things and also timing. Yes, does anyone have any questions about the?
Seems reasonably straightforward, doesn't it? I mean, if we think about the budget being a reflection of our overall financial strategy, and the fact that the forecast position, I always think of forecast, sorry, I'm always interested in going forward, is roughly that budgeted position. I know this one says plus or minus 370,000, but the numbers are a wee bit different, but not much different. April, I appreciate it. It basically says we're on track.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yep.
So the rating level is sufficient along with the other revenue for our operating expenditure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bad position to be in. Well, we'll come back to the CapEx actually. We can perhaps talk about our debt position, but from an operating position, we're pretty much where we expect to be without any, not what I could reckon just the incurred ball through throw.
No, we had the transfer from CapEx to OpEx of the
Good
plans.
point.
That was that's the only one that was picked up during the year that we could have potentially forecast before.
That one up, by the way, is that us or is that the auditors?
No, that was a discussion
Okay.
within the team, yeah.
It's good you to excuse something.
A review when we have a new chief executive is a handy thing to
Yeah.
do.
Okay with you. So is there anything on the activity statements that you as the activity summary? Sorry, I'm down on page 21 of our agenda. Again, it looked pretty much in line. Again, the redlining was for reasons that again are well established, so there was nothing particularly there. Also, we were about in the balance sheet, it's fine. Current operating, sorry, our working capital is fine. Checking on, okay. Talk about CapEx and debt.
Yes, CapEx has again had a bit of doability, as audit like to say, issue this year, and particularly we carried over from year one of the LTP 1.5 million for Greytown land purchase, and that we will be carrying over again into next year. We also had 2.5 million budget for the Greytown water, what was known as Memorial Park water previously, and we have only spent just over 300 of that, I think. So the remainder of that is due to be carried over. And then there would be an ever so slight timing. We're looking at the sports hub upgrade being July, unfortunately. So that will be about 800,000 carried over from there. All up, we're looking to carry over 4.5 million from the 16.5. That's including carryovers into the year and the new budget we had at the beginning of the year. So it's about 27%, which I agree is not a great.
Oh, the carryover.
Yeah, the carryover is 20%, 27% of, exactly, yeah. It puts the risk of, by the time you actually complete the projects, some of that budget having been nibbled away by inflation. And calls for perhaps a greater focus on timing when we're looking at projects, and wider than just a when would we like to do things, perhaps a when are we capable of
The
doing.
only benefit of that is it keeps your debt down, but
It does, so,
but
yeah,
we're all about services, and our services are not where we want to be.
absolutely. We consulted in the 21 to 31
Okay.
LTP on Greytown
Yeah.
green spaces, and it was a clear want from the community, so, yes.
Sorry, no, and what interests me is that when we're underachieving, perhaps I'll use that word carefully, when we haven't been able to meet where we want to be.
Mhm.
I'm always strongly interested in actually, how is that playing out in our renewal of what we have, as in contrast to something new. And something new in a place like South Wye could be really important for growth.
Mhm.
But actually, the renewal is about looking after what we're told.
Mhm.
Is there anything in the renew that's worrying us?
In the renew space, no, other than that, in the water areas. I mean, in the LTP, there was planning for growth and improvement, and the focus has been more on renewals than those growth and improvements. There's obviously the desludging program
Yep.
in Martinborough.
Okay, no, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So as I said, there's a small beneficial hit to our debt profile, not that it's spend, but actually it's something about services. It's one of those classic cases for a local authority where no spend is not necessarily an answer.
And the more you spend in capital on renewals, the less you tend to spend on operating repairs.
Right.
So it is a good thing to focus on, yeah. Mm.
Is that, it's not unusual for a local authority, for an organisation, a bit of an assistant hangover of undone stuff. Is there anything we're contemplating through the LTP to change that situation? In other words, are we investing in many things around, say, our project management?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Spread out, yes.
Yes. So we have budgeted for I forget whether it's called a project manager or an asset
Project manager.
project manager.
We're also budgeting for an asset manager. I think.
Yeah, and an asset, yeah. So the aim is to get cleverer about these things
Yeah.
and have plans associated with a time frame.
Right.
Rather than just projects, an actual planning time frame of those projects is a good thing. And more coherence between activities.
Yeah.
If you've got a plan to reseal some road, and then the year after that, you've got planned to put in some water pipes,
We're not talking about.
that's not great.
Careful, this is a bit sensitive here, Charlie.
So, yeah, the obvious thing is not to reseal a road and then dig it up the year afterwards to put some pipes in, so, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm not saying that's what's happening.
No, yeah.
Okay. Charlie, I'll be interested as the finance part of it. If we look at this in the year, on the assumption we've been able to find project management expertise.
Yep.
And look at actually physically how we are building certainty and delivery on that CapEx program. It's not for me to be necessarily, don't be deep into project management. I want us to look at this perspective of fiscal risk and the fact that we want to do these things. Okay, so that's the angle I'm looking at, other than, I don't know whether I should be careful, like we give an infrastructure committee or whatever, but that they can worry about the individual projects. I don't know, we've got a plan to do.
So through the chair, to ease your mind, what I've asked the team to produce is a work plan that says what's going to happen when during the 12 months, and to look for those collisions and to try and make sure that we have suitable work available for the different construction seasons rather than it all colliding in one space. So that is something that's in the strategic direction reset that we did, and confirmed through to council and to the staff in April. So that's all in play to start from July.
So if I was to think about, Jan, our project plans or objectives, project management to do it in contracting. The only issue and for achievement, the only thing that's stopping us at the moment would be that project manager slot.
And the work plan and understanding
Understand.
what the project justification is and
Yeah.
when do we think we're going to achieve it and have we overloaded it in certain places?
Well, look, Charlie, I'll be very happy to show you some of the stuff I said, which.
Perfect, thank you.
would be helpful for us just to monitor. Look, I don't want to overegg it. At $16 million, you only get to have one significant project blow up and the numbers look really odd.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whereas in a larger authority, it's possibly.
A little bit smoother.
I don't want to overegg it, but if we think you can, it does obviously a bit easier if we go and like them. There's a wee bit of information
Mm.
from this committee.
That's the intention.
Good, thank you, Jan. Well done.
Um,
Sorry, and I just want to look at the debt. What have we got coming up next year for debt renewal? Did I see something like about, I went through it, sorry, I should have had my system up. We've got a fair chunk of debt renewing next year, haven't we?
we have on the 1st of July, in fact,
That's
because
right,
we
this year.
borrowed
Next
as if,
year being
yeah,
the financial year.
we borrowed as if the prior water reform was going to go ahead, which was the prudent thing to do at the time. But we'll be renewing that as those water loans won't be paid off by.
So our average, I think I read somewhere, am I correct, our average sort of cost of funds around about 3.5.
Yes, yeah.
We're one of the best in the country.
Yes, we had some very good rates during the
That's right.
COVID
It's going
years.
to come under pressure.
Yeah. So we have used a weighted average forecasting method for our interest budgets.
Yeah.
So we've still got a year or so of reasonable weighted average interest rates. So I think next year is just over 4, and the year after a little bit more.
Do we use one of the professional houses out there for our debt management advice? Are you thankful?
We do.
We do now, so I could expect to see a Banford quarterly report.
Once we've only just got through the stand up for the cash facility, so
Okay, right,
we haven't rolled into that process yet, but you will next year.
great. And is that Miles or is it Earl?
I know both.
Yes, because that'll be good too, because I'd like us then to focus also around our financial plans.
Mhm.
And it's not particularly where I think it's going to those, being for team to, we're good for, quarterly, advice. Thank you, sorry, I've actually done all the talking.
No, you're great, yeah. I've been taking some notes.
Do you want?
Oh, g'day, Martin, you're here, can you hear us, Martin?
Let's see if I can try unmuting them from our end.
You be able to text them, Amy, just
I've
to,
been emailing him. He said he'd try coming in again around this time.
okay, oh, we'll keep pushing on.
I do just have one thing to point out, if I may,
Yep.
is that 2 of our investment thresholds were breached as at March.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And this is the nature of how this is going to work now that we are using our investments to pay down or reduce the amount of debt. We're naturally going to be reducing our investments. So it's that whole chunky, when a $2 million investment matures, then naturally all the other ones have a higher weight.
Yeah.
But I am required by the policy to report these.
Until the end of June.
And I think you have noted that, and we should note that we are in breach of our.
Yes,
What's that threshold?
50% for the main banks and 10% for the building society.
And we were at column 54%, we should have been 50 or less. We were at 11 with Wairaka Building Society, we should have been.
Yep.
But just to note that policy will be replaced.
Renewed, yeah, so
First of July.
So that'll be an
That's part
increase.
of your. You're putting your treasury management policy.
We are going to adopt a revised treasury management policy when we adopt the annual plan. Because it's linked to the change of process and how now we've gone through deliberations and changed that methodology, we now need to follow through and change the policy, so. It goes through on the 26th of June.
So that will increase the threshold percent?
Threshold for an exit.
One exit.
They do now.
Okay.
And we won't have investments in the way that we do now.
No, you won't have it with every bank that's possible.
Right, good.
Can you see the question?
Yeah, I think so.
There's all good, all questions are good. Thank you.
Then as for emergency works, or a bit left in the budget, I take it that's just because it hasn't all, this is a March and there's more's gone out. Are we on budget for that job? Did it come in budget or?
Believe it did.
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
It's all good. And then, just the outstanding rates, etc. It's getting quite high, which, I think we probably expected. Are those, so at the moment, so we're at $890,000 owing outstanding there. Is that there, things set in place to slowly claw that back or?
We have a good percentage of the people with outstanding rates on direct debit schemes. So by the nature of a direct debit payment, it's spread throughout the year, but our instalment due dates are at certain dates. So you might be technically overdue,
But you're not.
but you're actually actively paying it off. So that does have quite an impact on that. If we did monthly instalments, you'd see a lot less of that because people would naturally be more up to date with the quarters. And I do point out that the 890 includes Greater Wellington.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So what you're saying is that effectively that's a timing thing more than.
For those that are on
Yeah.
direct debit, yes. So this, if you look at the chart on the bottom right quarter of that report,
Yeah.
I asked for this to be shown slightly differently. So the total outstanding, and then the hatched section is those on direct debit. So it's only the solid section that are those people who we really need to focus on. Rest of them are actually actively paying off those outstanding amounts. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Thanks for your questions. Pretty good. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Amy.
Councillor Bosley can hear us and he can unmute, so
He can't
he
unmute.
can.
Oh, he
So
can.
so he is
Okay.
he is involved in the meeting.
Well, Martin, welcome to the meeting. I hear you're a bit crook, so we feel for you, mate.
Thanks, mate.
We hope you can hang around because we do lose Woody about half an hour, and I need you for a please. So
Yeah, no, I'm right here. I'm right here. All good.
oh, brilliant! And if you've got any questions, we can hear you loud and clear. So we'd be very, very keen to hear if you've got questions as well, Martin.
There you go. Thanks, Bruce.
Look, if there's no other questions, can we move to the resolutions then, please, which is that we receive. We note there's no textuous, we haven't actually asked that, but you've got this papers. And we note those two breaches that you, thank you, put it out for us. It is important that we note those. The corollary is we're actually recommending you change. We're living with those breaches.
For audit purposes, yep.
I'll ask the question basically, so I'm happy to move these motions. So I have a second. Thank you, Colin. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'll put all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, carried. The annual tax update, Charlie.
Yes, as you may all recall, in the last meeting, we adopted the tax governance framework,
Yeah.
which requires an annual tax update. So I've taken the opportunity of the tax year finishing to provide that for you. Mostly because I'm a tax geek and that was my timing. So, and I'd like potentially feedback on the format of the report, as in this is the first time that I'm providing this. So it would be good to know if there's any questions people have in terms of the format, so that we have time for next year to adjust those. I thought councillors might be interested in the taxes that we pay and how those are tracked against the previous year. The reason we had a difference in the goods and services tax was because we had significant grant programs the year before, so they have not happened in the same way this year. Then yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm strongly of the view that the money that's noted there as PAYE tax is not paid by the council, it's paid by employees.
Mhm. So is GST. We hold it on behalf of,
Purchase thing and
Mhm.
thus pay the,
Mhm.
Because it's PAYE, we still have a responsibility for reporting.
oh, we do.
No ideas.
Yeah.
Yes, you can imagine, know a number of employees get in trouble doing it. It's
Exactly right.
Yes.
Just a quick one on fringe benefit tax. I see you've made some changes there.
Yep.
So I'm just going through some of the stuff that I read the other
So
day.
essentially,
Yes.
yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
Charlie?
certainly. We have recently reviewed our vehicle policies and assessed that there was one vehicle we had where the arrangement in place considered that there was a private benefit to that arrangement. That has been changed now, and there is no taxable private benefit to that vehicle arrangement. So the quarter that ended 31 March was the last time that we, under the current arrangements, will be paying FBT. We'll obviously keep an eye on that for future. The more vehicles we have, you need to be careful that none of those new arrangements cause a taxable.
Yep, excellent. Nice to see, actually.
So our HR policies also back up, we don't have staff who self-sacrifice their car.
No, we don't, no, yeah.
Change.
Look, I like the way they report a lot better than you get to see than anything like that. It's good. And I think it's important for us just to eventually some changes, see what comes out tomorrow.
Yes.
It might change tax rates and look, just useful stuff for us to keep in mind around this. And quite rightly, as you say, with water solutions, will be actually better. We probably in the play.
It would be worth getting a risk and review done of the arrangements once we know what those going to be. Yeah.
It's a big set. I presume the shareholders will get that, just that. We've all got the same.
Yes.
Shareholders will have the same.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And we've budgeted for that advice.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Advice.
Yeah.
Good. That's really helpful. Any other questions on the next update?
First time I've ever seen one like that, to be quite honest. I don't.
That's good. No, it's
In all
good.
my years, I've seen that produced as a document like that, so very well done.
Move receiving of it.
Oh, absolutely, more than happy to, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Would motion all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
That's against, it's carried. Green. Audit updates, Charlie?
Yes, in case you weren't sick of me enough already, just updating you, this should be a regular item on the agenda as we're meeting quarterly. So updating you on our annual audit, because as we changed from doing an LTP, we deferred the LTP, there is no audit on an enhanced annual plan. So we managed to skip that audit for this year. It will happen next year when we do the LTP. So we are waiting for our interim audit. So you have your audit in two sections, an interim and a final. Interim tends to focus on transactions, processes. So we have a process document that says we do things this way. Audit come in the interim and watch us doing it and test us doing it and make sure that we do as we say we do. That will take place in the last week of June and first week of July, which is a lovely time of year to have an audit, she says. Although, yeah, I will be putting my team in charge of that because I won't be here for most of it. So that usually goes very smoothly. We've not had any significant challenges in the interim section before. And then we are due to have our final audit, which focuses much more on the statements, the draft statements and the draft annual report that you've provided. And since the new standard came in last year, a much greater focus on the draft performance indicators, the non-financial ones. So you remember we had a new standard introduced last year, 48. That focus is much more on that non-financial information. So we prepare that by the end of August. That goes to audit. They start on the 23rd of September, with obviously our legislative deadline being 31 October and the scheduled date for adoption of the annual report being 30 October. So cutting it very fine, and it will be interesting to see Audit New Zealand have promised us that they have adequately resourced and planned for a 31 October deadline. So we'll be keeping them to
They've
that.
promised that, haven't
In writing.
In writing,
they?
yeah.
Right, excellent.
Yes, so.
That'll be a first.
Yes, thank you. I had a question relating on page 34. Audit apparently have made 3 recommendations. I just do not understand the first one at all. So I was hoping for an explanation of it. What do they actually want somebody to do? And I do have a question on what the actual meaning of the third recommendation is, but go for it.
Yep, absolutely. So the first one is that we, in a very small district fashion, have in the past sent out declaration forms for people's conflicts of interest and related party transactions and relied on people sending them back to us. And just from a knowing everyone perspective, have ticked them off mentally in our heads. Yes, we've had all those back. Audit last year noted this, and that we really should be having some form of recording those declarations coming back into the system. So I have proposed that we use one of the suite of Microsoft offerings, which is called Microsoft Forms, to just do a very simple, it's exactly the same questions as we would have asked on paper for people to declare in the past, but it will be emailed out to you as a link. You answer the questions, or either yes or no, I have conflicts of interest and what they are. And I will be able to see who has answered that question. And once the form is returned through the Microsoft Forms, it also gives me the responses as well. So it's a register of who has returned there.
And I had a question about the third one, which I thought I understood. And then I thought, well, actually it could have 2 possible meanings. So they've identified an issue with fully depreciated assets. Seems to me there could be 2 possible problems. One is that our calculation of the life of an asset is so poor that, you know, we said it would die in, I don't know, 2000, but actually we're still going at it. The other possibility I would imagine is we have kept some things going a bit longer. They're zero value, but we keep paying depreciation on it. Which of the issues is?
We wouldn't be depreciating those assets with zero value, but the question is more around, are we actually still using them? So we happily depreciate them until they're worth nothing in our books. But what's the trigger for removing them from the fixed asset register or retiring them from? And the process of being without an asset officer for a while, we've perhaps let that slip. And we are planning to introduce those processes again once those roles are filled.
It's a matter that with an asset manager would be very good to know, mainly because we've got the practice in the sector of sweating the asset. So, you know, to use your example, we assume the asset will be its useful life will end in 2000, but we think, oh, it's worth trying to keep it going. It does actually mean we have underestimated its economic value for using it. But to actually have an understanding of those assets that are at zero value, be important to me, sitting in your seats, to know actually what's my renewal cost? They might be zero in value, but by okay, they're obviously valuable. When you've got to replace them, it's going to cost you money. So it's actually a really powerful governance and management question they're asking here. Which we
It depends what the assets are as well, because if they are key infrastructure, then you're running the risk of catastrophic failure. Which would be an immediate replacement that you may not have budgeted for. So it is important to know whether they are assets or key assets, to know whether a catastrophic failure is going to be something you have to deal with immediately or something you could do over time if you chose to replace it.
When we have the infrastructure revalued, we also get the useful lives remaining updated on those. So there's less of a risk in terms of us having
Unlikely to be.
yes, unlikely to be those assets. It's more like your IT hardware and
Some of
not so much vehicles, but yeah,
community assets.
yes, yeah.
And just before we move off on that one, just to go back to the declared interests,
Mhm.
it's important for people to declare not only known but perceived
Yes.
conflicts, because you may not have a conflict, but you may be perceived as having a conflict, and that can be just as problematic as actually having the conflict in the first place.
And it's useful to have an online or an easily viewable register. In the past, when big contracts have been awarded and things, we've had to flick through dozens of pieces of paper to make sure that the people on the team making that contract decision don't have those. I mean, we can ask them to declare again, and we always would during a procurement process, but having pieces of paper is not as easy as looking at a list of
I think
organisations.
that's probably an important one, so I couldn't pick it up from the reading. So this includes staff declaration of interests,
It will-
as well as also elected members.
It will this year. In the past, we have done that on a procurement ad hoc basis, so yeah.
No, I can say from experience, you need to know all your staff's possible. So I encourage that. So what you're getting a process of it.
Yeah.
So look, we've got a new auditor in the form of Karen.
Mhm.
I know Karen well because she's my auditor at Napier and at Wellington.
Mhm.
I have actually had a chat with her, Charlie, just running. into-
Can't resist, yep.
So I'd be very keen that we do ultimately have a Zoom in.
Mhm.
Unless she happens to be over here with work, that would be good. So, because I think actually the committee needs to have direct access to Karen.
Sure.
Our responsibility is to actually run it. I've actually also spoken with the Office of the Auditor General, and they have what they call sector managers who have relationships with each area. Buddy, right? And,
yeah.
And I'm encouraging the Office of the Auditor General to see that we need a relevant, so I mean appropriate in terms of size and what have you, relationship with the office as well as also with the so I've invited both in whatever ways appropriate to be at some stage. So this is the management report on a really old audit. I mean, this one perhaps. So what am I getting to? I would normally expect Karen to beam in for this item.
Right.
I'm not worried about this. Is an old audit, simple recommendations. Let's get away from that. Has she come up? You talk about dates. Has she actually come up with a formal audit plan and given that to us? Annual, what do they call it?
No.
Annual plan? No, audit plan.
Audit plan, yeah.
Audit engagement, I've just put down here to check for the audit letters for the engagement letter and the.
Yeah, because I'd expect there's a suite of stuff here that we should be, again, as a committee, we should be seeing, to discuss, because I've changed probably some of the writing, but might even be things that we're asking about. So if we could just note the next time around, there might be a wee bit of tidying up. Having said that, they've made changes. They're obviously dealing with the old audit, but I would be normally expecting for us to deal with the annual plan for the coming audit, at least by March.
Yes.
But I know I'm stating what you know. I'm just wanting to reflect that for the committee in terms of the program. I've got the expectation they will look to us.
Mhm.
And that February, March, whatever it is, that first meeting. in New Year. Okay, well, it's good, and look, and thank you for the fulsome responses. No,
Well, I'm just wondering, on page 52 and 53, the auditor puts down a whole list of stuff that people ought to read, and I'm just wondering, will there be a quiz?
No.
Will there be a what?
Quiz.
Will there be a
Oh,
quiz?
quiz, okay.
And I would actually, I mean, look, the thing that points out, Mark, is, I mean, it's easy to gloss over this. It's not mandatory reading, but there is some good stuff here. If we were thinking about this as a committee, I would recommend the second box, which is observations on local government risk management practice.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's actually, I should be careful because I have a personal interest in my committee dimension in it. So I am self-interested to make the declaration, but it's quite a useful read to understand how this committee. Okay, look, that's really good. Thank you there, Charlie. Again, no trouble with, I'm happy to clear this one out, but I think in future we try and expect a bit about prefix by the. Because in
Sorry,
fact,
I just had a quick question, sorry, Bruce, which was just, it's back to the asset management plan.
yep, sure.
It mentions there that an asset manager is being sought through the annual plan process. I don't recall having that being mentioned. Is that whereabouts are we up to on that? Because it seems to somebody in procurement or asset management would be ideal for us to have.
So that was part of the operating budgets that were indicated to be approved.
Already had
Yeah, that was already in.
Existing position, but it's.
Oh,
vacant
asset,
at the moment.
yeah, asset officer, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Got breakfast there from the final.
We will
Yes.
staging how we go to market with the vacancies at the moment.
Thanks for that, Boz. That's exactly quite right. An asset manager might seem like an odd little position, but it's actually really important to hold this all together for us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I look to the resolution we received the report? Do I have a move on, please? Thank you, Martin. Second, thank you, Woody. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. Right, our risk management update. How are we going for time for you? What are you going to do?
Couple of minutes.
A couple of minutes.
Couple of
Okay.
minutes.
Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Paul, your hands, man.
Thank you. I'll take the report as read. Just to highlight the fact that obviously the purpose of this report is to initiate discussion within the committee around the subject of risk, and obviously we've still maturing our approaches, our reporting and around risk, and obviously over a period of time we'll see an evolution in this space as well as we start to look at more and more ways in which we can gather data and better understand our organisational strategic risks. The things that I'd like to just highlight in the main on page 61, where we've removed some items as a strategic leadership team in April, May from the risk register because they were very operational in nature, being the regulatory failure, purpose, organisational design, customer centricity and privacy information. We're managing these on a regular basis as an SLT, and they are subject to ongoing conversation. In terms of the, for example, the organisational design, we've just gone through a reshuffle to make sure we're fit for purpose and we're meeting customer needs moving forward. There's been three risks added, sorry. As a result of those discussions as well, but other matters, including swimming pool audits, which I'll probably look to the CE to expand upon. It is a significant risk to us, however, including our legislative compliance there. Regional alignment, which is our relationship with our neighbouring councils. Particularly when we start factoring in the future of water reform and that kind of thing, but we're seeing conversations that's maybe indicating a misalignment in terms of shared services, agreements and that kind of thing as well. And the third one being health and safety. This we feel quite strongly is something that not only have we got a collective responsibility, but so it needs to be front and centre on an ongoing basis. So there's an increased focus on legislative compliance, which drove that the inclusion, as an example, as I said before, on the swimming pool audits. And the final thing I'd point out is that it's still our intention to be running a workshop around significant risks with elected members at some time early in the new financial year. Mike, any questions or comment? Or Janice, would you like to expand upon the swimming pool or?
Please, I wanted to, I dropped my pen, I saw that shouldn't be awake at night, so I presume it's something quite particular that I'm obviously missing here, Jens.
It's one of those operational issues that was not necessarily on anyone's radar.
Yes.
I had a query from a member of the public, and when I asked the data on where we stood with the audits, what I got back was not what I expected. We now have a plan in place to make sure that we are up to date by the end of December with all of the current audits that we need to make to keep ourselves in line with the legislative requirements. Bearing in mind that we only have one compliance officer who does a whole range of compliance activities. But I am focusing on those swimming pool reviews with some urgency. So we are intending to, where we can, and where we've got gaps with the building inspectors, to bring those up to date much sooner.
So we're talking about our responsibility to
Make sure that those pools are
pool fencing.
safe.
Yes. Yeah, okay. And what what I'm hearing, Dan, is that we haven't perhaps been doing those audits up.
We've been
Or
doing
that
them,
being
but not
said-
necessarily within the specified timeframe.
Yeah. Do you know how many we had?
600
Okay.
pools
Yeah.
in the region.
Right, I figured there could be quite a high number. That is a high number. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, let's head that on, although I noticed that you're probably comfortable that the controls you have in place now should make this a low risk.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
front and centre of regular meetings now.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Yes, Colin.
Just a quick question in terms of our own swimming pools, such as our municipal pools within Greytown, Featherston and Martinborough. There was a report on their general condition and operation some years ago, and I'm not sure if that is still valid or whether or not something needs to be done about our public pools. I mean, we focus a lot on obviously privately owned pools, but also what risk is there around our own public swimming pools in terms of health and safety? Have we done an audit on that?
It would need to be a discussion that's probably wrapped up in the work that the asset manager would need to do in terms of our asset conditions.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
No, that's fine. I just thought I'd throw it in the mix there when we talk about pools, because I know that there were some risks identified some years ago, and whether or not they've been mitigated.
I'm aware, councillor, there has been maintenance done to our swimming pools.
Yep.
So I don't want to speak out of turn, but it does feel that it's a low risk. However, it would be part of that asset work.
Cool.
Well, with health and safety, I'd have to say for my recent experience, and you tend to always think about your recent experience, so I'm qualifying what I'm saying. It's the health and safety around public pools is actually seems to be quite high around the country. So I'm not so much as, I mean, we don't maintain an asset. Fine. Well, I should be careful how I say that, but I'm going to say fine. The issue for me that I would be worried about would be the health and safety of public.
The practice.
Yeah. So, you know, are we able to you know, staff our pools with certified, but I like to say it's whatever we call them. You know, what are the incidents that are presenting themselves? So that will come back to that and look at health and safety. But I don't, that I think would be one underactive one. But I would again take that on advice from you as to whether that's a strategic risk or whether it's an operational risk or one that we don't need to see at this.
So I am aware that those types of we had an incident just this last year, and we do make it part of the contractual requirements that around appropriate training of staff that staff those pools, and to make sure that health and safety requirements are adhered to.
Yeah.
That they receive appropriate training for rescue and that kind of thing. So that there's quite a lot of rigor put into those contractual expectations for the management of our pools. As you're quite right, it isn't just about whether or not you have a cracked tile or that might cut someone. It's about the operationalisation of the pools, during open time.
Like the two guys who drowned was 2 days ago, I think.
The ones on the bottom of the pool.
Two people who drowned.
That's right, yeah.
I like, and it is operational things. I mean, I was dealing elsewhere, because I still might mention the council where a hydroslide was game rocks. It's just very hard about where we adequately.
Look, I know since I've become mayor, I've reported swimming pools that have no fences around them.
Yeah.
But they're also alongside new houses, or they were at the time. And it occurs to me that you can check up on the swimming pools you know about, but do you know about all of the swimming pools that actually need to be, shall we say, inspected and what have you? I would sort of appreciate an update at the next one of these meetings on how well that particular item, e.g. the swimming pool inspection, has progressed, because it's one thing to drown in a fully fenced, staffed, whatever. It's a different thing if somebody drowns in an unfenced pool that we possibly might have known about, and at that stage it becomes quite a significant reputational risk.
And to use, I think even a step further, if I may, that we've even had some residents who are claiming not to even have a pool, and yet it's evident from Google Maps that they've got a pool. So there's clearly work that needs to be put into.
It's another variation.
One other item that I would raise is on page 78, and this is around the Lagoma requests. And if I may, I'll provide a little bit more substance other than the text within that section. We are seeing
It's on page 78.
78, sorry, yes.
To
Lagomas. Yeah. We've had 163 in total. 13 have not met. People have been well communicated to. There's been one in particular that did slip through because of the nature in which it was reported. But we are seeing an increased number now that are from small groups of people or individuals, which is driving quite a workload on the team. And so I'm just raising it now, and we will keep you abreast of that as it progresses. But we want to, and we strive to be open and transparent and open by default. However, it is getting to a point where it's actually a lot of work on the team now. Amy in particular is the person who manages our Lagomas for us. And whilst we can, that we have the Ombudsman report that actually says, or the guidance that says we can start charging for them, we don't want to go there. We want to be as open and as helpful as we possibly can be, but the within the bounds of being reasonable at the same time.
Paul, can I just interrupt? I mean, is there a way of saying, your first request is free, but everything after that you start to incur a charge there, right? Just to maybe nip that repetitive nature, that vexatious angle in the bud. And is there?
Quite often, councillor, it's when the response invites another question, which in turn invites another question, and so we are trying to be as open as early on as possible, but sometimes you can just never provide enough information.
Look, my experience, Martin, would be the need to be I think you have to be careful to label a person vexatious.
Yeah.
Best processes. So like, you know, you've mentioned one and then a second request. I don't think, I think that it's a bit too of a low threshold to be determined as vexatious.
13 is
The best process that I have seen is where councils have cleared that threshold of vexatiousness, if that's a word, with the ombudsman. And made it clear that the ombudsman would also accept that our census person's vexatious is reasonable. So I appreciate that.
And just two very brief final points. We haven't, on the issue of the ombudsman, been subject to any investigations in the last, since July 23, and there's no privacy breaches to report.
Congratulations. Sorry, Colin.
Bruce, I'm sorry, yeah, some of my question was actually answered by your
Thank you.
comment, but I am keen to know how many of, are there a small group that would just about breach that threshold for being vexatious?
So what's,
in your interpretation?
apologies, councillor, I interrupted.
Yes,
We've had conversations just over the last 24 hours about how we're going to keep more accurate recording around the time being spent on Lagoimas, who is actually recording them, you know, the frequency and the time, to almost try and categorise them in some way. So when we do reports, we're providing you with that more insightful view of our Lagoima requests, because it's looking at numbers, I appreciate, isn't necessarily going to give you that overview, but the moment that you start to see that they're coming through from the same people, and it is ultimately it is about the request, not the person that's making the request. So it's
about the request, not the person.
yeah. So we have
Yeah, that's a fact.
it's about the internal mechanisms that we put in place to ensure that if there's been a request, we then make that information public in order to avoid future requests needing to occur. So that ongoing transparency in terms of our systems and our processes on the information.
But it doesn't change the individual. I mean, you're focused on the
I
information provided,
accept that.
Yes, Mark.
Look, once upon a time in another life, I was actually responsible for dealing with these sorts of matters. And just two thoughts. One is, a lot of people ask for material that actually doesn't exist, but somebody goes ahead and creates it for them. The Act does not require that. The Act only requires us to provide what exists. So I think we sometimes have to be careful that we don't, shall we say, show too much kindness to people who wish that some information exists.
Indeed.
But if it is to exist, they may have to take some other reports and compile it themselves. It's not our job to do it for them. The second thing is, I think from time to time, there is a bit of a cycle in these things where people have a bit of a bad experience with seeking information, because it is possible for us to add to our workload by being obstructive or being unresponsive or a number of other things. And now what happens is, the next time that person comes along, instead of just asking for what they want, they ask for a whole lot of peripheral material that might be what they want, because they think we will be sneaky and, you know, shortchange them. And again, in my experience, often if you bring those people up, you know, with a bit of goodwill and say, what is it you really want? Well, actually, this is what I want to know. Oh, go and look at the web, this link, or if we can give that to you today, even. Sometimes, I'm not saying that will work always, but there was a lot of reasonable people.
And we've started doing that, Mr. Mayor, yeah, absolutely. And I know that Amy is incredibly proactive in that space, and to drill down to the problem rather than it becoming a free-for-all information sharing exercise. Sorry.
Through the chair, I've been really clear since I've been here that the information doesn't exist. You don't have to respond. That it's quite clear in the Act that you don't have to create information to satisfy Lagoima. And so we've had those conversations.
And nor do we do analysis either. That isn't
No.
No, it's not.
Can I just ask a couple of questions, please? Again, I'm going back to my recent experience. I mean, there's still risks probably the regulatory failure and liability for continuing compliance activities. Can I just ask, why has that been delisted as a strategic risk?
I'll take that one. Because they are statutory timeframes and they are operational risks. So the requirement to meet those statutory timeframes sits operationally with me and my team. But it also sits in the portfolio relationship between our group manager and Councillor
Okay.
Old. So it will be reported, but in a different way.
Yeah, so this is really about meeting statutory deadlines, etc.
Yes.
Okay. Look, I want to be very careful how I say this. Again, I don't want to reflect. I'm talking about recent experience here. I have seen one or two councils where if I watched have a more fundamental failure around the total regulatory environment. So I'm talking about trying to staff and have a credible regulatory, which we could argue the staff is in contrast to necessarily a regulatory issue, but it comes out that way. That's what I was wondering whether we would, if that's the case, that's fine. But look, it's that compliance. The other thing, Paul, you've written here, I mean, I've gone through the list thing, you know, it's like, if I could make comment, I don't know that that's the but your bullet point under 5.1 is the relatively high levels of residual risk, the current volatility within. Agree, totally get it. It's a tough sector to be either an executive or a manager. And I think your LTP will show you the challenges of really operating many different types of businesses. Is there any that you would well, perhaps I should put it this way. Are there any here and there are a few that are red that are really outside SLT's outside SLP, so we call it SLP, we senior leadership teams.
Leadership team?
Oh, strategic leadership. So that is outside your comfort zone. Because I mean, I want to reflect. We're going to have a workshop on strategic risk. Somewhere we need to also sit down and discuss risk appetite. Because my point being simply that if we are outside our risk appetite, our tolerance, that actually argue we need to sit down about it. So I'm not saying you aren't doing anything about some of these risks. What I'm really saying is there any that are exercising strategic leadership team's mind?
Yes, and one of the new additions, in fact, is something that I shared was an area of concern and has now been added to the list, which is around that regional alignment. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's outside of our comfort zone, but it's something we're incredibly aware of. For a whole lot of reasons. I mean, in terms of to reform, in terms of how we've got shared services, for example, and the shared services were historically set up in a way that had a focus on cost efficiency rather than better outcomes. And so it's driving a certain type of behaviour where we're finding it difficult now to have a meaningful future focused conversation around the opportunities around integrated services rather than trying to deal with the historical issues. That is one area that we've been exploring in detail. Health and safety, but from the point of view of how we see it as a collective responsibility within the organisation. Not necessarily that we don't take it seriously, of course we do, but how do we make sure that it's interwoven through all of our tendering, procurement practices, our operational oversight, all of these types of things. So those two, it's not that I would categorise them any differently, we just become more increasingly aware of them.
I'd add two more to those actually.
Yes, I think.
And they are out of our control. The legislative reform, the government reform
Yep.
with the coalition government at the moment. There's hardly a week goes past that I don't get a letter or some change pop into my
Yep.
inbox that's coming from that. And I think that's, we're having to roll with the punches as they come through. They are pretty consistent in how they're hitting us. And also the economic shock, SR7. I don't think if we put the clock back 24 months, we'd have expected to be nationally in the position we're in as local government with double-digit rate rises across the country.
Yes.
That's an unheard of position
Yes.
in the time I've been in local government. And I'm not quite sure how we wind back from that, having got to these high levels of cost around certain things that we have to do. I'm not sure how we wind that back. And then how we transfer that to the affordability conversation for our ratepayers. And again, there's not a lot we can do in there because, you know, we have to carry out the services and do the things we do unless we're actually going to start looking at reduced levels of service, which would be part of the LTP discussion. But those two, I think, are ones that test our thinking quite often.
It's really helpful, Jan, in import. I'm totally get why those for particular. And do we have the luxury of a year now to think about economic shock and the government reform? Well, probably not,
I've got-
because it is at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's something that we can plan away.
It's funny, I had to attend by Zoom another council's adoption of the audited CD today. It's about to go out to consultation. And I had said to them, our 21-31 LTP was tough but positive. And I said this one is tough and relatively uncomfortable. One of the reasons it's uncomfortable, it's a long way of coming back to your point, is that at the moment so much of what we would want to control and plan for depends on external.
Yeah.
In that case, it was central government, obviously, the way you talked about. It was our local regional council relative to consents for wastewater treatment plants and time we our CapEx and our regional feds. Could we work with them on three? So yeah, you've got.
Yeah, I have. I'd quite like to drill down a little bit on the regional alignment as identified by Paul as a risk, and I hear what he's saying in terms of an operational perspective, in terms obviously with shared services, etc. From a governance perspective, I'm a little unsure or unclear of regional alignment risks in terms of having these conversations, and perhaps that might not be a factor in the thinking.
If I may give you an example, because it's in the public domain, so
That's fine.
no issues
Yep.
with with speaking about this point, but it was when you have a council that consults on an issue that has a domino effect on your own strategic direction without a consultation or conversation occurring beforehand, which happened on this occasion, right?
Okay.
Within the Wairarapa. So
Yep.
we're in a subservient relationship to another partner, member of the.
So how was that particular incident or whatever addressed internally? Was that?
Well, it's being addressed internally, but it's one example of conversations around, are we working or exploring opportunities thoroughly to work as a collective Wairarapa versus the without thinking about what that might mean in terms of what an operating model, to make sure that we're mitigating those risks. And on that particular occasion, it just wasn't explored thoroughly enough.
I'm just thanks, Paul, and I'm just thinking a little bit aloud here, and it may well be worth running a workshop with our governance group just to address these particular issues. Because as we start these conversations, and particularly around affordable waters, and we're working collectively together as a region, then I guess we need to understand where our boundaries lie. How much information do we share? How much of a, we don't ever give a guarantee, because there's no such thing as a guarantee until it's been a resolution of council. But I'm just thinking, I'm very cautious personally when I'm talking to other councillors, and often you might say something or make a comment on something, and all of a sudden it's taken out of context and flipped back. So I'm just wondering whether or not we should have some level of understanding, I guess, to me. And I think that would be very helpful about just what's talked about, what's not, from a governance perspective, not from an operational view.
It's really helpful. Oh, sorry, Mark.
I haven't discussed the issue of shared services with Paul, so I'm not sure whether he's referring to a shared service that has also been exercising my mind because of a, shall we say, a sudden change of mind by one of our partner councils. And I am aware that the sorts of things you refer to, another council can pull out quite quickly in actual fact. But it has occurred to me that there are possibly some circumstances which kind of make it easier for that to happen. And one of those things is I get a sense that many of those sort of partnership arrangements, shared services, call them what you will, don't get sort of set up and then just sort of put on automatic. And then there's no sort of regular, are we all happy?
That's exactly our point. Yeah, that's exactly our point.
And if it gets to the point where one council is no longer satisfied, but there's no discussion taking place, then you can sort of understand why, from their point of view, they want to maybe pull out, reduce their commitment quite suddenly. Where if we had a different sorts of, how often do we? I suspect what often happens is that at the operational level, there are possibly people talking about it, but as the funding and the outcome level, not a whole lot tends to happen. That's my sort of sense after a year.
And that's a very accurate reflection of the situation, Martin. Yeah, for CERTA in the last training, for example, there was a Wairarapa Library Services Committee that looked specifically at the provision of the library services across Carterton and South Wairarapa. That is more of a substantial service offer than some of our other shared services arrangements around climate change, positive ageing, walking and cycling, these other more single person shared services, and that they tend to, or they have tended to be more fluid in how they've been operationalised without necessarily the governance oversight. And the first you'll quite often hear about them is through a report of some kind, which it goes back to my comment around how they've been set up in the first place.
Okay, let's just note then those are, and I'm very open, Paul, to SLT bringing other issues of concern about. That's actually the benefit of this discussion.
Absolutely.
I think the workshop that you're talking about will be good, because what I'd like to perhaps explore at some stages. So what are the real actions that we're doing to lower the risk, which would be. I think at the stage it's probably worthwhile us just again going back to that 5.1 really. We've got a change in our risk profile, but overall red qualified, which is making it, I suspect, difficult. There's no other questions or comments. Can I suggest we go to the resolution, which is that we received? Have to move that way.
I would like to move an amendment that we seek a report on the swimming pool issue at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's either-
Is that a particular? Yes, okay.
I've got it as an action.
Got it as an action.
I did an action item. Yeah, that'll be great. Okay, so let's put the motion that we received. Should I have a second in the end?
Yeah, well,
I'm just happy to think it, Matt.
absolutely.
The motion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, if we could then move to the health and safety.
Thank you. So again, I'll take the report as read. We've had a slight adjustment for the health and safety report because this is health, safety and emergency management, in fact, but you'll see that we've actually split it off into health and safety risks and then an emergency management table as well on page 87. So what I will do, I'll just add a little bit of context in the first instance to why that has been done. Emergency management is quite often one of those subject areas that gets discussed in a very reactive way, rather than it being a strategic discussion, and felt it necessary to bring that to this table. How prepared we are, how resilient we are, in essence, should be interwoven through all of our planning, whether it be infrastructure planning or water resilience, so on and so forth. And so, yes, we have got the monitoring and the oversight from a health and safety perspective, but yes, that emergency management is about that strategic oversight. So that was the context. In terms of health and safety in the first instance, starting with page 86, we've had two reports relating to risk of public initiated harm, where two of our members of staff were, one of whom was subject to verbal assault and a low-scale physical assault by a member of the public. That was immediately addressed, reported to the police, and the chief executive was very proactive in responding to that. Thankfully, there have not been any additional incidents of that nature. There has also been an awful lot more work being done with our various tier 3 managers around health and safety risk management, around our contract delivery, to ensure that things like people working from heights and that more operational health and safety practice is again interwoven through the delivery of our service, because we are in essence still the PCBU for the delivery of our services. There has been staff engagement. We are trying to really restart the staff engagement process, because under the Health and Safety at Work Act, we are required to have a mechanism by which we engage with staff and create that feedback loop. What we're doing is putting an increased emphasis on well-being. I know, for example, Fulton Hogan several years ago had one which was simply about going home safe at the end of the day. That is really the culture, the well-being focus that we want to apply to this. So that is where that whole staff engagement initiative is now going. Policy updates, and the driving policy has now been rolled out, the refreshed driving policy, and we are seeing a reduction in the amount of speeding incidents. It's amazing what you do when you time things up again.
GPS in the car. Yeah.
Well, it was always there, they just didn't realise it. Yeah, we are seeing a significant improvement in driving risk areas. In terms of emergency management, so again, just to expand on that bit of context there, it's about management and readiness and preparedness around all risks. So it could be an earthquake, or it could be looking at how we deal with coastal communities who get cut off during a severe weather event. It could be a crisis, it could be an emergency. And so how resilient we are and how much of an overview we have over our levels of preparedness is something that we are now working on across the 3 Wairarapa councils. And we have a member of staff working out of Masterton Council who over the next 12 months will be conducting a review of our preparedness levels across the 3 council areas to help us understand and map our current levels of infrastructure versus where our most significant areas of risk are, not just from a response perspective, but from a perspective of are our communities able to support themselves in the event of a crisis or an emergency. So that should be a really important piece of work over the next year. And you'll see from the rest of the, or much of the rest of the report around reduction readiness, response, recovery. There's already been a lot of activity being undertaken to help get a good view of where we currently stand. And finally, with the Appendix 1, those are the health and safety metrics, is the dashboard, and the sickness reporting will now be captured under the people report, which is next on the list. Thank you. Invite any discussion or comments.
Really grateful all for your section on emergency management. I have to say this is worrying me as a risk chair, given what we're hearing from the Mataparae review, the bush reviews, and actually what's coming out of places like Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, but we don't know what might hit us. And when it hits, we're ready. So very helpful to understand that. So grateful that you've heard that. So we have questions. Yes.
Well, just an observation. I wonder on 87 whether the risk description is really accurate, because in my head, the risks are actually quite well understood. I actually think most people do know if something goes badly wrong, what it is that's going to have gone badly wrong. What I think, though, is the real risk is our inability to respond to it after it has happened. And again, you've just mentioned the Bush review, for example, and then there's a couple of others that have come out, which basically, the summary of it is, if New Zealand has a bad thing, we're stuffed, And I've always thought actually the same thing happens here, because there are a number of risks which, when they affect here, they affect Wellington. And so as Wellington has the resources that we might otherwise have called upon, don't think they're going to come here first. So
Quite right, Martin. And in fact, when we were looking at a 7-day wait for the most basic of essentials, because of the joys of the Rimatuka Hill suffering us, and our major lifeline being north, and the Manitou Gorge being that historical lifeline, we do find ourselves in a situation of isolation. But just to go back to your original comment, that's why I've called it knowledge of localized risks, because I agree with you. It is the response. There is a risk around response, but the reality is at the moment is there's never been a conjoined conversation around infrastructure investment, and for example around Cape Palliser Road, Coastal Retreat, all of these big gnarly decisions. And if we don't do something, what is that risk associated with those communities? And that is what I'm flagging here, is that it's about bringing all of that wonderful information together to provide this committee with that strategic oversight. So yes, we know what the risk is in terms of readiness and response, but are we investing in the right places for the future, with an emergency lens to it?
This will be giving rise then to the resilience plan.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, I just really want to make an observation, because I've been involved with civil defence over the last probably 35, 40 years in one way, shape or form. And of course, we used to work in isolation to some extent. We'd look after our communities, we'd have the resources that we needed there, and we would respond if there was anything of any any consequence. The model now still allows for that, but probably on a more strategic overview of the entire district as a whole, which is a great thing to see. And the work that Nigel and Paul have been putting into this probably over the last 2 or 3 years is really starting to show through in planning that level of resilience across our district, but also considering our hubs within our communities as well and taking those into consideration. So I don't know if that's a directive from Remo or whether or not it's an initiative that's been taken up by Paul and Nigel, but I'm really grateful that, you know, we've got a system in place now where we're prepared in the event of something of a catastrophic nature. So thanks, Paul.
Thank you. I mean, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, yes, we've been working on this over the last 3 years, but we, in many respects, we're fortunate to have the insights of Remo, but Remo are not there as a helicopter to jump in, you know, and save the day in the event of an emergency. So they have done some work around lifelines, but what we find, for example, is, you know, we had a conversation just last week, and Jan and I talked about it earlier around tsunami zones, and we're pretty flat, you know, and if the Hikurangi Trench went off, the current tsunami zones would not be sufficient. You know, we'd be seeing an influx of water considerably further than what is currently mapped. Other things around, for example, when you look at it from a Wellington lens, they didn't think we had any supermarkets in South Africa, apparently, because they classify a supermarket based on population size. So there's been an educational point from our angle to feed back and say, it's not really right. We just got big dairies, and we've got home kill facilities, and we've got all of these things, right, that are going on. So in part, and I don't claim that we've made some radical change, but a lot of our work has been to educate Remo to actually say this is what the Wairarapa looks like, and they need to adjust their thinking a wee bit. But yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for including the health and safety?
I think just on that, it's probably further down on the list of priorities, but I often think, Paul, one of the questions I get asked a lot here from the public is like, what do we do in case of an emergency? They just don't know what they would do, where they would go. Just the thing, sort of the other day, like, you know, back in the old days, you got the yellow pages. At the back of the front of the yellow pages was all the things you need to do, all the important phone numbers of the emergency services and the things around, you know, that do to help you out. And I've often thought that maybe we should do something like that in the 3 local papers of, you know, in case of flooding, this is what you should do, or, you know, where the marae is and those kind of things, you know, just to get that message out there more obviously.
I couldn't agree more, and there is, you know, there has been work done in this space, but we have a small group in each of the 3 towns and more broadly within the rural areas who tend to be quite self-sufficient in cases of a crisis or emergency, but we certainly don't take that for granted. But there is certainly ongoing education needed to build that understanding within the broader communities, because we tend to have a select group of maybe 20, 30 people who take a real vested interest in it. And there's we need to connect this work into other areas. For example, our welcoming communities approach. You know, how do we inform new ratepayers that are coming into the community? So this is the work around resilience building, knowledge within the community, but also from your perspective as governors to actually talk about it from a strategic point of view as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Well, it's a risk that is real, so we need to keep this in front of the board. Yep. Absolutely. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Can we move to the resolution, please, which is that we receive. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for the information. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. Rightio, that gets me to the people report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of sick of my own voice at this point. Well,
the good report.
So this is the first time you will have seen this report. The people. So the people report is intended to give you the high level insight into the organisation. Council and its leaders have a duty of care towards its staff, and by extension, any people interacting with the organisation through its delivery of its services. And whilst our workforce obligations are clearly defined through legislation, the legislation around employment law is largely interpreted. And as a result of that, quite often finds itself to legal challenge. So this first report is to provide you with maybe a bit more substance than what I'm reporting on in the future, just in these early stages, to give you some of those ideas of what the types of legislation that we could find ourselves challenged under. The only employer of staff at council is the chief executive, and the only employer of the chief executive is the council. So, but that said, we are talking in many respects about creating, and this is where the connection with health and safety comes in, creating a culture of inclusivity and psychological safety. And so this is where the two intersect with one another. And I made, I did a presentation right at the very beginning of the triennium around mutual respect and interactions to make sure that everybody felt comfortable with our operating environment. So as per the previous two reports, I've highlighted or included a risk table in there to highlight what some of those more strategic risks are. Conditions of employment. Now, this could well be in the form of whether they're competitive, the implications for attraction, retention, whether there's any conditions that might underpin a personal grievance, those types of things that then cause the organisation to incur costs or legal challenge. Knowledge transfer for critical roles. This is something which is particularly important for local government because what we tend to find is that we have people who are employed into a role and then, and I've got a couple with my team that have been around since Noah was a boy, and then the moment that they leave, you lose all of that institutional knowledge with them. And so finding mechanisms to capture that, and just to give you some context around this, I think about our organisation in three different components. We have our psychological environment, which is basically how we think about what we do and how we operate. So that's our cultural environment. Then we have our physical environment. Is our physical environment set up to do the best possible things, to achieve the best possible outcomes? And then we have our technological environment. Do we have the tools and the processes and the systems in place to deliver the best possible outcomes? And any one of these three things that's missing causes for reduced effectiveness in terms of a council. And so when we start talking about knowledge transfer and we think about it in a people lens, we need to have the mentoring in place, the technology in place, and the mindfulness in place to pass on this knowledge to other people. So is that kind of making sense? It's like how all these things intersect with one another. And that's something we're through the information management project that we're particularly mindful of. Everything is done with a customer lens to it. The next one is around leave liability, something we did flag at the last meeting, and I've included it within the register here. We still do have, and it's within the dashboard a little later on. Automation, AI in the future of work. I remember not so long ago, this was just one of those things that, oh, this will never happen to us. And believe me, it's here and we're dealing with it in the here and now. And I spoke with our IT manager yesterday and he's going to produce some insightful narrative for me to guide what AI presents to us, both in terms of risk, but also opportunity. We can get quite defensive about AI, and in fact, we shouldn't, as long as we look at it from the point of view of better outcomes. And then
should be totally using it.
Yeah, one which Janice has leapt on just within 6 months, and her and I have had some fantastic conversations around this, is around form following function. Local government often finds itself in a position where it's structured very traditionally in a Westminster style of organisation, very isolated, very insular, and it doesn't promote a good collaboration within the organisation. So these are some of the risks. And whilst many of them are well mitigated, they are still things that we're very conscious of. So to just the last couple of points around risk monitoring, health and safety reporting. And so, as I said, health and safety reporting will go through the health and safety report, but sick leave will be reported through this report. One area of risk that we do have operationally is around time to appoint. And this isn't just about from a recruitment perspective, this is about service delivery and our ability to deliver on our projects. If we don't have the talent in place at the right time, then it obviously has that domino effect. We have to keep abreast of shortages in critical areas, salary competitiveness, conditions of employment, as indicated already. And this is particularly relevant in the more technical spaces, planning, engineering, and those other areas that are in high competitiveness. Accountants, for example, are always in high demand. And finally, one area I'd touch on is around delegation. So again, a conversation that SLT are going to be having is around how do we deliver outcomes, better outcomes in a timely manner that actually makes us easy to do business with. And so after the organizational shuffle, we've been calling it that. It hasn't been a change process. It's been a bit of a dance. We'll now be looking about what are those, one of those components, the technological and psychological environments. What does that mean in terms of how we delegate work and how we delegate good decision making down into the organisation for better outcomes? So those are the things I just thought I'd highlight to you. The appendix is giving you an insight into the organisational structure. So if you didn't know already, things like gender count, employee count, length of service, age breakdown, because length of service in particular, we've got some incredible people that have been here for a very long period of time, but that in itself does present some challenges for us in terms of retention of knowledge. Invite any questions.
Thanks very much. Quite a comprehensive report. Lots of red there, which is always a bit of a worry. Recruitment and retention are always really important in any organisation, whether it's small or large. And I'm just wondering when staff leave and leave for the right reasons, that we conduct an exit interview and whether or not we've learnt anything from those interviews at the time, whether we've done something wrong as an organisation or whether it's a personality clash or whatever it is, So they must have a good benefit, I guess, in terms of analysis.
Yeah, we do exit interviews. There can be a whole range of different reasons why people leave. It could be that they don't get along with the manager, they've found a job that pays a lot more money. I mean, we only have to look at Kiangora when that ministry was formed, and then there was a sway that building control officers go and work for them for 50,000 more. How on earth can we possibly keep up with that? Which then poses a risk for us and our ability to meet statutory timelines and all of the other things. And there's a number of other things that come out of it, but generally speaking, you only have to look at the periods of time that people have been working for us. We've got sticky staff. People like working for us, and we've got sticky staff. And
use that phrase.
whilst people like working for us and they like sticking around, I get a great deal of pride in that, and I know the rest of SLT does.
Yeah.
We are always going to get the disgruntled ones.
Yep.
Of course they are, but when you've got 80% of your workforce that live in the South Wairarapa, I think that says an awful lot.
Yes. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Paul on this?
No questions for Paul, but I will leave it 4:30.
4:30, yes. I'm too, actually. I've got a wee bit of extra time. I'm so conscious, but I think according to my orders here, I can't go past 2 hours of break, so let's see how we go. I think we just about there. This is a really helpful report. I did wonder actually whether moderates of all the church, I suspect, in terms of residual risk. And I had wondered whether in fact there were some more nuances behind it, but it's not me being, perhaps that's risky me being cheap. Where we had one at Green, the rest were all sort of moderate, and I didn't quite know what that meant relative to actually what you're saying about sticky staff and you know, perhaps a general level of comfort with being an employee with working in a public sector organisation. I wonder whether in fact we were being a bit hard, but having said that, I actually think monitoring looking down the risk descriptions is actually a really important point. So, you know, that's a marginal fatigue.
On that note, Mr. Chair, I like us to be hard on ourselves, mainly because we're talking about the employee experience here, and you know, we want to make it the best that it can possibly be. But I'll take your point. So,
yeah, I'm not suggesting you spend a lot of time trying to actually convince me that should.
Paul, that was a great report. Thanks, mate. I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you, Boss. That's really great. I also think, you know, it's great to get the appendix. I'm certainly conscious of paragraph on page 94, which is really a bit of advice to us governors. We should be looking at some of the metrics at the very least. I mean, these are all lag metrics generally. Although I suppose you could argue staff engagement may well be indicative of future retention and ability, but I agree that we should be looking at that. Colin, I agree with your point that actually somewhere down the track to perhaps add to this would be good to perhaps understand an anonymous or an anonymised report on externalities. And I mean, often, by the way, for health and safety, and it really comes across both even from EAP or whatever services we use here in terms of employee support.
on just one final point, Mr. Chair, one thing we haven't reported on during this first refresh round of reporting is going to be around legal risk, and we are in the process of appointing a part-time legal executive in the new annual plan period. We've found that actually we spend an awful lot of money on legal advice, and there's certainly efficiencies that can we have some in-house legal advice, and to be able to identify what the strategic legal risks are right across the organisation would be something that we'll be reporting on as well in the future.
Brilliant. Look, this is helpful, and I'm grateful for it. So the risk that we are under we're dealing fulsomely with a very good report. I do think we should move to the motion. Thank you, Martin. Motion, all those in favour, please. Brilliant. Okay, just to follow up on the action items then. We basically control there, don't we?
They're all action. I didn't see any that were.
All action, I think.
Yeah, according to the report.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, I think we only leaving the past solution on this one, do we? Okay,
Don't want to.
we received that information. That's really good. Thank you. I'm going to go back and check my where I'm at. Well, the action items it actually says the clean we've done all public, so well done. Actually, that's well done. We've done that, Jen. I think when you think about we're going on before, the fact that we had a meeting, we talked about our finances, we talked about our risks, we talked about why it's respectful, we've been able to have been public chance to see, and I'm very grateful. Could folk join me in closing Harry? Thank you for that, people. Thank you, Chair. It's lovely to be here, and I appreciate the effort you guys. Martin, thank you. If you're not